Hi, inspectors. This is John with Honor Services and InterNACHI. I've been a member of InterNACHI since 2008, been doing inspections since 2007, and we're here today to give you an update on the 2026 Wind Mitigation OIR B1 1802 Wind Mitigation Form. So this class is going to teach you a little bit about the new form and some things that you need to be aware of if you're going to start filling this out on April 1st, 2026. So we're going to jump right into it. And one thing I wanted to point out is I do have some credentials. I am a licensed home inspector in the state of Florida, home inspector number 21. I am a mold assessor, certified residential contractor, certified general contractor, licensed roofing contractor, pest control operator, and a CMI, and a member of, and like I said, member of the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors for quite some time. So one thing I'd like to point out right away with this is the OIR has done some different things with this. They're going to start collecting the data from the form. They're going to collect everything but the personal contact information of the who the form is filled out for, meaning the buyer or homeowner. So they're going all that other information from the form is going to be collected and stored. So one thing to keep that in mind if you're doing these is you want to make sure they're right, because as we've said in many other classes in the past, you're not going to be the first person to that house, and you're certainly not going to be the last person to that house. And the last thing you want them to do is start seeing stuff that's inconsistent with their name on it. So they have to report that within 60 days of the new policy taking effect. So wind mitigation, what is it? We've all seen this before, or most of us have. This is just spots where hurricanes have made landfall in the state, around the state of Florida. And one thing I'd like to point out here, this is just the landfall. This doesn't tell you what the tracks were. So just because it didn't hit around a certain area doesn't mean it didn't track through another area. So, and then we also have to deal with tornadoes coming off of hurricanes. So what started it all was Hurricane Andrew, 1992, came across the Miami area and did some real devastation. So these are just some old images of it. And, I just like to remind people, this is what got it started. You got us moving down this wind mitigation program. Hurricane Andrew did some devastating damages. This is a garage. The roof's gone. The cars are flipped over. I'm not sure how that even happens, but it did happen. So again, the news flew over in helicopters. This is before drones and cameras and things like that, cell phone cameras. And they took a bunch of pictures, and you could see the devastation was quite extensive. So why do we have wind mitigation? Why do we have impact ratings? Well, here's an example. This is what happens. We have windborne debris, which flies through the air and can damage other things. This is a 2x4 through a palm tree. What is wind mitigation? Well, wind mitigation is the strengthening of an existing structures to resist wind or hurricanes. So we talk about it with hurricanes, but there's other forms of wind mitigation, and we generally talk about it in terms of the form itself. But remember, it's more than just the form. It's about hardening the home. So meaningful dates. And I put these up here. If anybody's taken a wind mitigation class before, they all look pretty familiar. But I like to point out that in 2004, they came out with a supplement. And some of the things in the form have changed. And this is why it's important that we go ahead and we understand these changes. So when they put out these supplements between the 3-year cycle on the building code, they can change some things. And these things become important, not only for code when somebody's building a home or retrofitting a home or remodeling a home or building, but these things take effect for insurance purposes too. So when we say this is, we always talk about look at the dates, and some of them don't really match with the dates in the previous forms, which is why it's important to understand where it comes from. So in the supplement, the 2006 supplement and the 2004 building code, here's a few things that came up. And this is, you can kind of understand why we're at where we're at, and this kind of explains a few things on why we're looking at certain things. So mechanical equipment. Remember, if you were around, we used to just throw an AC on any old 2x4 or 4x4 or cinder blocks or on a roof on some 4x4s, and that was that. Those days are gone. The use of the wood sleepers are no longer permitted. We had added there windborne debris protection using a fastening schedule for wood structural panels, plywood over windows. We have approved connectors and other fastening devices not included in the code shall be in accordance with the manufacturers instructions is added in there. Some other things about wood framing, reinforcement, gable ends, shear walls. And that's when we started the 25% roof rule, meaning if 25% of the roof was damaged, then you had to replace the whole roof. And then we just passed it a few months ago. We're back to the 50% rule. If 50% of the roof is damaged, you can repair up to 50% of the roof. If it's more than 50%, you have to replace the whole roof. So it's important to know that because people will ask you down the road. So key dates and changes. So in 12/8/2006, ring shank nails were required for all roof deck attachments for prescriptive designs, meaning a new construction may not require it, but renailing the roof deck, we required that. Soffits were required to be designed to resist wall pressures in 2006. I know it sounds weird, but when Hurricane Michael went through the Panhandle, that was a big thing. A lot of soffits blew out. It's one of the things when they looked at that, they said, and there was water damage because soffits blew out. So not part of this class, but I do have some slides at the end if we get to it, understanding that you have to attach your soffits properly. So an option for ASTM D71858 Class H, shingles for wind speeds at least 130 miles an hour. So we're not going to, you don't need to worry too much about that, but we'll touch on it. Elimination of the panhandle exception. Panhandle was kind of left out of the building code a little bit there. That was eliminated in 2007. And elimination of the partially closed design option 2007 as well, meaning you could build it to a higher pressure, the windows could blow in and the building would stay together. And that was removed. Water damage. So just one of the things. So we also had some changes in the wind speed maps, and this is just a chart to show you kind of what they are, when they changed them, that kind of stuff. So just remember, because one wind speed might have been years ago, it may not be the same in that area. So the maps should change. It has to do with calculations, and we're not going to get into that. But I want to point out something here on the bottom is that we also have this 130 and greater within the mean water line where exposure D exists. That means the high water line, and then D is an open area. Here's an overlay of the old map and the new map. So you can kind of see the difference in what they're calculating here. And you can see why we have things like the windborne debris region change. So again, windborne debris region in color, also within a mile of the coast. So we're going to touch on that a little bit in areas where the design speed is 140 or greater, basically. So that comes down. So you'll look in my area here, Brevard County, we're at 140 plus, just about everywhere. So I also like to point this out, is that in this table is they said they updated the windborne debris region to include inland areas within 1 mile of the mean water line where exposure D exists, rather than 1 mile of the coast. More inland areas with design wind speeds from 130 to 130 will require opening protection. So just keep that in mind. What you knew in the past may be a little different now. So we're not going to go too deep into this subject. This is fascinating, but what we're talking about is a quadrant in an open area, and we're talking what we call exposure D. So basically means the terrain is flat, unobstructed, anything on the water, mud flats, salt flats, things like that. And this comes from code, and this comes from engineering. We don't get too far deep into this, but I just want you to have this so you understood what it meant. So also in 2014, we had an amendment that stopped home inspectors or inspectors, any kind of inspector, from offering compensation to an insurance agent for referrals. So it was pretty prevalent back in the day. We charge a client a lot of money for wind mitigation there, and then we give a kickback to the insurance agent. And it was always in forms of a gift card or something like that, but let's call it what it was. So they would, instead of charging $150 for wind mit, they charged $200 and give $50 back to the insurance agent. So the insurance agent had an incentive to refer that inspector. So that's not allowed anymore. So reporting wind mitigation features. We did this in the beginning. There was different forms, and now we have this standard form, the OIR forms. But different insurance companies had different forms in the early days. So we had a 2010 form that was revised in 2012, and now we have the new version, which is for 2026, April 1st. So we had asked them to give us some time to make sure everybody had time to learn this stuff. Software companies had time to update their information, that kind of stuff. So Where does the OIR B1 1802 apply? And I'll call it the 1802 from this point because it gets a little wordy. They mean site-built structures only. This is not mobile homes. This is site-built structures. It's single-family, multifamily houses or condos in 3 stories or less. If we have a condo that's 4 stories or greater, that's a different wind mitigation form. We're not going to touch on that in this class. That many times in Florida, a home inspector cannot fill that out. You need different licenses for that. But occasionally you will have people say, hey, I need a wind mitigation on this. And if it's just for the unit, a lot of times they need some basic information. And you certainly can give it to them. And you certainly can present it on there. Just make sure it has the unit number that it's for. And a lot of times you're looking at opening protection and maybe the age of the roof, something like that for them. So it's important. So what are the insurance companies looking for? Now, we used to say there's 7 items on the wind mitigation form. There's now 9. Some of them changed a little bit. So 9 specific data points that offer improved levels of wind resistance and mitigation credits. So we have the code, which is the structure. When was it built? The region it's in. It's a new one. So we have these wind regions now. Roof slope. So what's the slope of the roof? Roof covering, roof deck, roof to wall. Roof geometry, which is the roof shape. We've talked about that many times. We'll get into that a little bit. A sealed roof deck now is a / also our SWR, secondary water resistance. So they've kind of changed the name of that a little bit. And you'll see why when we get into it. And opening protection has always been that, including shutters and impact reading devices and windows. What we don't know right now is what the credits are going to be. And we don't know that because they just started publishing. So it's hard to say this is going to be this or this is going to be that. So we're going to ignore that. We're not going to talk about it too much today. But once those credits are out, look for an update. InterNACHI will have another class. We'll have another finalized version of the class, and you'll be able to get that information. So where do we get the permitted information? Well, property appraisers. We get the year built from the property appraiser. We get build facts. We can use the local jurisdiction. We have a list of links in our local area of all the websites, of all the wind MITs, or all the permitting stuff. It's important to do this stuff ahead of time. We also use the property appraiser for what? Finds the year built. So that's our CO date. Come into that. And then our any permitted information we can find, of course. And then also we like to look at the aerials. A lot of times they have much better aerials than some of the other softwares or websites out there. So we get that. And we also look at the sketches of it. And that's helpful when we're measuring. It gives us an idea. And it also gives us an idea of the roof shape. Again, will come in very handy later on. So we want to grab that information before we even start the inspection. And this is the property appraiser card or tag or website from our local one. And you can see the address pulled up here is 2005. So it was built 2005. So it's a single family residence, and that's the way it looks. And we'll have that in our documentation for later on. So where does that 2005 go? Right there in the title block. That is the year the CO. It is not the year the permit was applied for. That is the year of the CO. Some property appraisers may have an effective year, which is fine, which means they took it down to nothing and basically rebuilt it without rebuilding it. So that would go there. And also then we would add in the number of stories. Now we wouldn't add that in without looking, but I think that's important to understand. So put number of stories there. And what is a story? It's basically 7 feet of exposed area that is not a contained attic, and we'll kind of touch on that here in a minute. And so, but if you have 7 feet of pilings, like you're on the ocean somewhere, and the floor is 7 feet up, that is, even if it's not occupied, is considered a story. So, this house here, if you look at the top right from the front, it looks like it'd be a 1 or 2 story house. Could even be a 1 story house from the front. And then you look at the back and you realize this is definitely a 3 story house. Now, if you have an attic and it's fully contained, you can walk around up there, and even if you put a room up there, but it's not open or exposed to a side, there's no balcony or window or anything like that, there's no wall to that attic, that is not a floor. I didn't make these rules. This is just what's been going on since the wind mitigation since day one. So don't shoot the messenger, but that's the way that it is. So you can have an enclosed room in an attic. Perfectly acceptable, does not count as a floor, but if it's exposed, meaning you have a window or a balcony or a doorway or something like that going to the outside, then it's certainly a floor. It's not really considered an attic, even if we use it as an attic. So this is new here. So we've always had this note on the bottom of our title block, and I'll take this moment here to say something about title blocks. Make sure you get the basic information right. There's so many times that you hear stories where people start with, they couldn't even spell my name right. They got the address wrong. They got the county wrong, whatever. Get the basic information right. If you're going to get something wrong, get something hard wrong, right? Test taking 101 and from from high school, middle school. Answer the questions you can to make sure they're right and you're good. That'll get you much more credibility. You get the easy ones wrong, they kind of frown at you. But down here they have is a fortified home. Basically what it says is any attribute in marks questions 2 through 9, you can use a certificate from a fortified home. Fortified home is a program to give credits and use that as that item. So we have a fortified home, we have fortified roof, silver and gold. And I'll go through those here in a second real quick. But we can look at those and use those as proof. We don't really have to do a whole lot more. So the type of certificate, and we want to attach a photocopy. Insurer may ask, of course, additional questions. It's always been there, comes up. But attributes marked questions 4 through 6 and questions 8 through 9. So those are the ones we can do, right? So we will not need any other documentation. So just remember that. So this fortified home thing here is, again, attributes, questions 2 through 9, we can use it. And then the certificate, we can always use the roof stuff 4 through 6. And this will all come apparent as we go through the form a little bit. But you're going to want to attach a copy of this. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is make sure it's not expired. Here's the different designation levels they have. And again, you'll see a certificate and you'll kind of get it. You may not see the hail supplement is not necessarily used a lot here in Florida. But hurricane and high wind, you have new roof, existing roof. You have fortified silver. So you have those roof ones. So there you go. And this is what it looks like, the certificate. That's the gold one. And again, we can use this as documentation. And here's the silver one. And then remember, these things do expire. So they'll have an ID number on the bottom and an expiration date. So if it's expired, it's no good. Sorry, I can't use it. So we're going to go into the building code here in just a second, and we'll go from there.